Today we're going to compare living in Paraguay to living in Mexico.
What are some of the commonalities that you've spotted, Gerald?
Some of the commonalities that I have spotted are concerning the culture. Mexico, like Paraguay, is a collectivist society, so family life is highly prioritized in these countries, making it a very livable place. I mean, in both countries, they're very livable places because family life is very, very important. Now, to those of you who are unfamiliar with the term collectivist society, it basically means that people in Paraguay and Mexico, so Mexicans and Paraguayans, they really love family life. The family is very, very important in this part of the world, in this hemisphere, whatever you want to call it. What's interesting is that in many places, I mean, especially in Paraguay, you see a lot of people, a lot of families with 3 to 4 children. It's actually very, very normal. If we compare that to the West, finding a family that has 3 to 4 children is actually very unheard of. What I want to say here is that you're much more likely to find larger families in Paraguay and Mexico than you do in most Western countries. For instance, in Paraguay, of course, there are also exceptions. Let's say you're looking at the more modernized neighborhoods in Asuncion, you see a lot of really work-focused people. So it's developing, it's changing, but for the most part, for the majority of the country, people are very, very family-oriented. So this is definitely one of the similarities, one of the commonalities that I have spotted. And this is actually a big point that makes Western expats move to places in Latin America because they really want to escape the individualistic society that they're accustomed to back home. So they're looking more for like a family-oriented environment. And I'm sure you could agree that Paraguay is a great place for families. It is very family-oriented. So many people like North Americans, Europeans, they are moving to Paraguay because they want that kind of lifestyle. They want to have that laid-backness. And to be fair, in Mexico, that's also the same. You have a lot of really laid-back places where you have really great community life. For instance, in the southern provinces of Mexico on the west coast, this is very common. Oaxaca is one of those places. Or if you take a look at Veracruz, it's another one of those places where you have a lot of community life. You have a lot of families with plenty of children.
What about the weather?
This is an interesting question because the countries are actually very different, but in terms of weather, there are some similarities. For instance, if you are accustomed to the hot, humid, and tropical weather, I mean, you know what a real summer day here looks like, Bianca. It's really hot. Now we're in December. Now we had a bit of a lucky time because we were getting in a lot of rain. Like the past, I would say 10 days have been rainy. They have not been so hot. But if you take a look at the period that happened before Christmas, I would say like a week earlier or so, sometimes 36 to 38. And it was really hot. So it's a really weird humidity here that you have for a certain time of the year. It's not like this forever, and Bianca can confirm all of this. But if we compare it to like Mexico, there are many different climates in Mexico. Many microclimates, but there are also many climates that are drastically different. But to compare to like Paraguay, Bianca, it's like to have the same climate in Mexico, I think it would have to be on the Caribbean side of Mexico, or it would have to be on the Gulf, where you have the same kind of climate. Like if you're used to a hot summer in Texas, you can probably make a hot summer day work in Paraguay and Mexico as well.
What are some of the differences that you've spotted?
Some of the differences that I've spotted start actually with pets. If you want to bring a pet into Paraguay, I was actually quite surprised that one of the differences that I've spotted in Paraguay, I think they start with bringing a pet into the country. For instance, I brought my dog into Paraguay. And one of the things that I've spotted is that at the airport, upon your arrival, nobody really checks your dog. In Mexico, it's very different. If you're flying in from America or Canada and you're flying into Mexico, well, they actually check on your documents. They examine the dog. They ask you to take him out of the bag, the doggy bag. They did that to me every time I landed in Mexico. In Paraguay, that did not happen to me. Not at all. Like they did not even check the dog. They saw the dog, but they didn't care about it at all. So there's more of like a lenient attitude towards animals here that I've spotted. And this is not just you arriving at the airport. I've also seen like people take their dogs with them into supermarkets, which I haven't really seen in Mexico at all. I have not seen that there. But here I've seen that like people are just walking into the supermarket, for instance, into Biggie's with their dog. Another big difference that I would say is definitely that Mexico has more climates. Mexico has one advantage. Mexico got the ocean. That's a big difference, right? So in Mexico, you can choose, between so many places to live in, where in Paraguay, you have that too, but you just don't have the ocean. And I feel like that's a big difference, right? So the climates here in Paraguay, they are also different. For instance, in the region El Chaco, the climate is hotter than here. From what I've heard, I have actually never been there, so I would like to visit maybe this time around. From what I hear is that the climate there is much hotter. But here in like Asuncion, it's definitely also hot, and it's a subtropical climate. Like Mexico, especially in central Mexico, you actually have more places to choose from, right? You have high elevation cities in central Mexico, and then if you take a look at, for instance, the coast, right? You got so many different places to live in, right? In Mexico, you got so many different places to live in where you have so much access to climates that just do not exist here in Paraguay. However, if you're in Paraguay and you want to get out of the hot weather, what you can do is you can take your car into Brazil, you can take your car into Argentina, you can jump on a flight, it's like a 90-minute to 2-hour flight to get to the beach from here. So you find workarounds.
What about the time zone?
The time zone is a very important question that people have, because a lot of you guys watching, you are still working. You're not 60 plus, you're not 70 plus. So work matters to you. And if you're employed by an American or Canadian company and you have to fit into those hours, then, living somewhere in Latin America just makes a whole lot more sense than living in Europe or Asia does. It's just a more convenient time zone. Now, if you want to go live in like Mexico City, you're not going to have any problem. In fact, nowhere in Mexico will you have a problem with the time zone. You might be ahead an hour, you might be behind an hour, maybe 2 hours max, but it's usually pretty easy for you to make this work. Now in Paraguay, the time zone is different. So here in Paraguay, Bianca, we're 2 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So let's say right now it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Asuncion Paraguay time. That means that on the East Coast in America, Miami, it's like 1 p.m., right? If it's 1 p.m. in Florida, it's 3 p.m. here in Paraguay, which is not a big deal either. So you're 2 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time, 3 hours of Central Standard Time, and you're, I believe, 5 hours ahead of LA time, right? So you can pretty much make this work. There's a gap there, right? Let's say you're coming from California and you want to live here in Paraguay. Yes, there's a 5-hour time gap, right? A 5-hour time difference. But a 5-hour time difference is still a lot better than a 12-hour time difference or a 16-hour time difference. So you can make this work pretty easily.
You're welcome to hire us for obtaining a residence permit in Paraguay and Mexico.
Thank you for watching Nomad Lead. We see you on the next video.